Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the reinforced observation window, watching the golden grasslands stretch endlessly beyond the biodome's perimeter. The Kenyan Conservation Sanctuary housed the world's last 13 lions, protected by electromagnetic barriers and monitored by countless sensors. As the project's lead geneticist, Elena had spent 7 years ensuring their survival while the species teetered on extinction's edge. "Another breach in Sector 7, announced Marcus Chen, the facility's security chief, his weathered face reflecting years of protecting endangered species across 3 continents. His fingers danced across holographic displays showing red warning signals. "Third one this month. These poachers are getting bolder." Elena turned from the window, her long black hair catching the afternoon light filtering through the dome's transparent aluminum panels. "How close to the Pride?" "Too close. Sana's den is less than 2 kilometers from the breach point." Marcus pulled up thermal imaging showing the lioness and her 3 cubs resting beneath an acacia tree. "The cubs are barely 8 weeks old. If poachers reach them, they won't." Elena's voice carried the determination of someone who'd lost too many species to human greed. "What about the perimeter drones? Offline for maintenance." "Perfect timing for these bastards." Marcus slammed his fist against the console. "I've got ground teams mobilizing, but they're 40 minutes out." Through the observation deck's speakers, they heard the distant rumble of approaching vehicles. Elena's heart raced as she watched dust clouds forming on the horizon. The poachers had military-grade equipment, judging by the electromagnetic signatures Marcus's scanners detected. "There," whispered Dr. Amara Okafor, the sanctuary's behavioral specialist, pointing to movement in the tall grass. The young Nigerian scientist had been tracking Sana's behavioral patterns for months, documenting the lioness's fierce protective instincts. "She knows they're coming." Sana lifted her massive head, golden eyes scanning the landscape with predatory awareness. Her cubs mewed softly, sensing their mother's tension. The lioness rose slowly, her powerful frame silhouetted against the African sky like something from humanity's ancestral memory. "She's moving them," Amara observed, watching through binoculars, taking them deeper into the preserve. Elena's hands trembled as she activated the emergency protocol. Red lights bathed the control room as automated systems prepared for the worst-case scenario. "If we lose Sana's bloodline, we lose the entire East African genetic variant. These cubs represent 30% of the remaining genetic diversity." The approaching vehicles grew louder, their engines echoing across the savannah like mechanical thunder. Elena could see armed figures through the reinforced scope, their faces hidden behind tactical masks. They moved with military precision, suggesting this wasn't their first illegal hunt. "Perimeter breach confirmed," Marcus announced grimly. "They're inside the sanctuary." Elena watched Sana nuzzle her cubs, urging them toward a rocky outcropping that offered natural protection. The lioness's maternal instincts battled against her territorial nature. She wanted to fight, but her cubs needed her alive. "She's making a choice," Amara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Between confronting the threat and protecting her young, Elena gripped the window frame, feeling the weight of species extinction pressing against her chest. Everything they'd worked for, every genetic sample preserved, every behavioral study conducted. It all came down to this moment. The last lions of East Africa, cornered by the very species responsible for their near extinction. "Not today," Elena vowed, her reflection staring back at her from the reinforced glass. "Not on my watch." Sana's powerful legs carried her across the rocky terrain with fluid grace, her 3 cubs struggling to match their mother's urgent pace. The lioness had survived poacher attacks twice before, bearing scars that told stories of humanity's relentless pursuit of her kind. But this time felt different, more organized, more desperate. Behind them, the mechanical roar of all-terrain vehicles grew closer. Through the preserve's hidden cameras, Elena watched the poachers deploy with military efficiency. Their leader, a tall man with silver hair and expensive tactical gear, directed his team with hand signals while speaking into a satellite communicator. "That's Viktor Petrov," Marcus identified, his voice tight with recognition. Russian arms dealer turned exotic animal trafficker. He's been hunting the last breeding populations across Africa. For his private collectors, Elena's blood ran cold. Petrov's reputation preceded him. He specialized in capturing the final members of dying species, selling them to wealthy buyers who treated extinction like a commodity. How many men? 8 confirmed, all armed with tranquilizer rifles and capture nets. Marcus's fingers flew across the tracking display. They're not here to kill, they want the cubs alive. Dr. Okafor focused her high-powered telescope on Sana's position. The lioness had reached a natural shelter formed by ancient granite boulders. Her cubs pressed against her warm flank. She's cornered herself, Amara observed. There's only one way out of that formation. Elena studied the topographical map, her mind racing through possibilities. The sanctuary's emergency response team was still 20 minutes away, and the perimeter drones remained offline. But there was something else. An old maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the rocky outcropping where Sana sheltered. The underground access point, Elena muttered, remembering the tunnel system built during the sanctuary's construction. We could reach her position without being detected. Marcus shook his head. That's insane. The tunnel hasn't been used in years, and it's barely wide enough for one person. Besides, what could you do against 8 armed men? I won't let them take her cubs. Elena's voice carried the weight of personal loss. Her own daughter had died in a car accident 3 years earlier, driving Elena to dedicate her life to protecting the young of endangered species. These lions are the last of their lineage. If we lose them, we lose everything. On the screens, Petrov's team advanced methodically, using thermal scanners to pinpoint Sana's exact location. The lioness crouched low, her powerful muscles coiled like springs, ready to defend her cubs with her life. She won't abandon them, Amara whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Lions don't sacrifice their young to save themselves. Elena grabbed emergency supplies from the medical bay, sedatives, first aid equipment, and a portable communication device. Marcus, guide me through the tunnel system. Amara, monitor Sana's stress levels and keep the documentation cameras recording. Whatever happens, the world needs to see this. The maintenance tunnel smelled of rust and stagnant water. It's narrow, walls pressing against Elena's shoulders as she crawled through darkness. Her headlamp illuminated ancient concrete and corroded pipes, reminders of humanity's attempts to control nature through technology. Above her, she could hear Sana's low growls and the anxious mooing of cubs. The lioness sensed approaching danger, her maternal instincts heightened to supernatural levels. Elena had studied enough lion behavior to know that Sana would fight to the death. Before allowing strangers near her offspring, thermal signatures show them moving into position. Marcus reported through Elena's earpiece. Petrov's setting up crossfire positions. They're planning to tranquilize her from multiple angles. Elena's hands scraped against rough concrete as she navigated the tunnel's tight corners. Her breathing echoed in the confined space, mixing with the distant sound of her own heartbeat. Somewhere above, the last lioness of East Africa prepared to make her final stand. The tunnel ended at a rusted grate beneath the boulder formation. Through gaps in the metal, Elena could see Sana's massive paws and the small, fuzzy bodies of her cubs. The lioness's golden eyes met Elena's through the grate, and for a moment, predator and protector recognized each other. I'm here, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible above Sana's protective rumbling. I won't let them take your babies. Elena's fingers worked frantically to remove the corroded bolts securing the tunnel grate. Above her, Sana's breathing grew labored as she sensed the approaching threat. The lioness's cubs huddled closer to their mother, their innocent eyes reflecting fear they were too young to understand. Position confirmed, crackled Petrov's voice through stolen radio frequencies that Marcus had intercepted. The female is isolated with 3 cubs. Prepare tranquilizer sequence Alpha 7. Elena's emergency communicator buzzed with Marcus's urgent whisper. They're moving into final positions. Sana's surrounded on 3 sides. You need to get out of there. Not without the cubs. Elena replied, finally freeing the last bolt. The grate fell away with a metallic clang that echoed through the granite chamber. Sana spun toward the sound, her powerful frame coiled to attack, but something in Elena's posture, hands raised, eyes averted, triggered recognition rather than aggression. Dr. Okafor's voice joined the communication channel. Elena, her stress hormones are through the roof. Any sudden movement could trigger a defensive attack. Elena slowly emerged from the tunnel, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. She'd spent years studying lion behavior, understanding that direct eye contact could be interpreted as a challenge. Instead, she focused on the cubs, 3 small bundles of golden fur that represented the genetic future of their species. Sana's massive head tilted slightly, studying this strange human who'd appeared from beneath the earth. The lioness had encountered researchers before, but never in such intimate circumstances. Her maternal instincts warred with territorial caution as she processed Elena's presence. "Beautiful babies," Elena whispered, her voice carrying the gentle tone she'd once used with her own daughter. "I know you want to protect them." Through the boulder formation's gaps, Elena could see Petrov's team positioning themselves with military precision. The Russian trafficker raised his hand, signaling his men to prepare their tranquilizer weapons. In seconds, they would have clear shots at Sana from multiple angles. Elena made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She reached into her emergency kit and withdrew a powerful sedative, not for the lions, but for herself. If she could create enough confusion, enough chaos, maybe Sana could escape with her cubs. "Elena, what are you doing?" Marcus's voice crackled with alarm through her earpiece. "Giving them a chance," she replied, injecting the sedative into her arm. "Document everything. The world needs to know what we're willing to sacrifice for them." The chemical coursed through Elena's system, making her movements sluggish but her mind strangely clear. She stumbled toward the chamber's entrance, deliberately making noise to draw the poacher's attention away from Sana's position. "Target acquired," Petrov's voice echoed across the rocks. "Unknown female, possibly a researcher." Adjust firing angles. Elena's vision blurred as she emerged from the boulder shelter, her arms raised in surrender. Through the sedative's haze, she saw 8 armed figures surrounding the rocky outcropping, their weapons trained on her instead of the lions. "On Dr. Elena Vasquez," she called out, her words slightly slurred. "Lead geneticist for the preservation project. These animals are protected under international law." Petrov lowered his rifle, his weathered face showing amusement rather than concern. "Dr. Vasquez, your reputation precedes you. Unfortunately, international law doesn't apply to private collections." Behind Elena, Sana emerged from the shelter with her cubs pressed against her flanks. The lioness's golden eyes assessed the situation with predatory intelligence. Recognizing the shift in the hunter's focus, her cubs mewed softly, sensing their mother's tension. "The cubs are barely 8 weeks old," Elena continued, fighting the sedative's effects. "They need their mother's milk to survive. Separating them now would be murder." "My clients pay premium prices for young specimens," Petrov replied coldly. "They adapt quickly to captivity. When removed from their natural mothers." Elena's heart broke at the casual cruelty in his voice. These men saw the last lions not as living beings with complex emotional lives, but as commodities to be harvested. The sedative made her legs unsteady, but her resolve remained firm. "Over my dead body," she whispered, collapsing to her knees. Between the poachers and Sana's family, the lioness seemed to understand the sacrifice being made. She approached Elena slowly, her massive paw gently touching the human shoulder. For a moment, predator and protector shared an understanding that transcended species barriers. "Touching," Petrov sneered, raising his tranquilizer rifle. But, ultimately pointless, Sana's roar shattered the afternoon air, a sound that echoed across the savannah like thunder. It was a call that had summoned her kind for millennia, a mother's defiant cry against those who would harm her young. The sedative flowing through Elena's veins created an strange clarity, as if she were observing the scene from somewhere beyond her physical body. Sana's massive form moved with fluid grace, positioning herself between Elena and Petrov's team. The lioness's amber eyes held an intelligence that transcended animal instinct. She understood the sacrifice being offered. "Remarkable," Dr. Okafor whispered through the communication channel, her voice thick with emotion. "Sana's treating Elena as part of her pride. She's extending her protective behavior to include a human." Marcus's voice crackled with tension. "Emergency teams are 15 minutes out. Elena, you need to stay conscious." Elena's vision wavered, but she could see Sana's cubs pressing against her legs, their small bodies warm and trusting. The youngest, a female with distinctive dark spots around her eyes, nuzzled Elena's hand with surprising gentleness. In that moment, species barriers dissolved into something more fundamental. The universal bond between mothers protecting their young. Petrov's team hesitated, their weapons trained on an unprecedented scene. The Russian trafficker had captured exotic animals across 5 continents, but he'd never witnessed such interspecies cooperation. His finger tightened on the trigger, but uncertainty flickered across his weathered features. "Sir," one of his men called out, "the lioness is shielding the human. We can't get a clear shot without risking the cubs. Then we take them all," Petrov snarled, his patience exhausted. "Tranquilize everything that moves." Elena felt Sana's powerful muscles tense as the lioness prepared to charge. The mother's instincts overrode self-preservation. She would die before allowing harm to reach her cubs. Elena's drugged mind grasped the futility of their situation, but something deeper stirred within her consciousness. "Sana," Elena whispered, her hand finding the lioness's massive shoulder. "Trust me." What happened next defied scientific explanation. Elena began to hum, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to emerge from some primal memory. It wasn't quite human, but it wasn't animal either. The melody carried notes of ancient lullabies her grandmother had sung, mixed with something that sounded like the territorial calls she'd heard lions make to their cubs. Sana's ears perked forward, her aggressive posture softening into something resembling curiosity. The cubs responded immediately, their mewling taking on a harmonious quality that complemented Elena's humming. The sound echoed off the granite walls, creating an ethereal chorus that seemed to speak directly to something buried in genetic memory. "What is she doing?" Petrov demanded, his rifle wavering as he struggled to understand the scene before him. Through the preserve's monitoring systems, Dr. Okafor watched in amazement as Elena's vitals stabilized despite the sedative. Her brain activity is off the charts, she reported. She's accessing neural pathways that shouldn't exist in modern humans. Elena's humming grew stronger, and Sana began to respond with soft vocalizations that researchers had never heard before. Not quite purring, not quite calling, but something that seemed to bridge the gap between species. The cubs joined their mother, creating a symphony of sounds that spoke to bonds forged across millions of years of evolutionary history. "It's impossible," Marcus breathed, watching the thermal displays. "Her body temperature is synchronizing with the lion's. Her heartbeat is matching Sana's rhythm." Elena's consciousness expanded beyond her physical form, touching something ancient and profound. She felt Sana's memories, the joy of her cub's birth, the pain of losing her mate to poachers, the desperate need to protect the last of her lineage. In return, Elena shared her own memories, the love for her lost daughter, the dedication to preserving endangered species, the willingness to sacrifice everything for the survival of others. The connection deepened, becoming something that transcended the boundaries between human and animal consciousness. Elena understood, with crystal clarity, that this moment had been building for millions of years. A reunion between two species that had once shared the same African plains as allies, rather than enemies. Sana's roar, when it came, was different from her earlier territorial call. This was a summons that reached across the preserve, calling to something that had been sleeping in the genetic memory of her kind. In the distance, answering roars echoed from the sanctuary's other lions, all 13 of the last breeding, adults responding to their matriarch's call. "Jesus Christ," Petrov whispered, his weapon lowering as he realized the magnitude of what they were witnessing. "They're all coming." Elena's smile was peaceful as she felt the approach of the other lions. Sana had done more than protect her cubs. She had awakened something that would change the relationship between humans and the wild forever. The last lions weren't just giving them their cubs. They were offering partnership in ways that science had never imagined possible. The sedative finally claimed Elena's consciousness, but not before she felt Sana's rough tongue gently licking her face, a gesture of acceptance that marked the beginning of a new chapter in the story of two species, learning to trust again. Elena awakened to the gentle weight of a lion cub pressed against her chest. The youngest of Sana's offspring, the female with distinctive dark spots around her eyes, had curled up against Elena's side while she slept, Sunlight filtered through the granite shelter, casting golden patterns across the unlikely family. "She's been there for 6 hours," Dr. Okafor whispered, approaching with careful steps. "Sana won't let anyone else near you, but she seems to accept the cub's choice." Elena's head throbbed from the sedative's aftereffects, but her mind felt clearer than it had in years. The events of the previous day rushed back: Petrov's attack, the desperate stand, and the extraordinary connection she'd felt with Sana. "The poachers gone," Marcus replied, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and amazement. When the other lions arrived, Petrov's team decided the cubs weren't worth the risk. "They're probably halfway to Somalia by now." Elena slowly sat up, careful not to disturb the sleeping cub. Sana lay nearby, her massive form relaxed but alert, golden eyes watching Elena with an expression that seemed almost human in its complexity. The lioness had made a choice that would reshape everything scientists thought they knew about animal behavior. "The footage is already going viral," Dr. Okafor continued, showing Elena her tablet. 70 million views in the first 12 hours. "The connection you formed with Sana, it's unprecedented in the scientific literature." Elena watched the video of herself humming to the lions, seeing the moment from an outside perspective. The harmony between human and animal voices created something beautiful and profound, a sound that seemed to awaken ancient memories in both species. "We've received calls from 12 international conservation organizations," Marcus added. "They want to study what happened here. The Global Wildlife Foundation is offering unlimited funding for research into human-animal consciousness connections." Elena gently stroked the cub's soft fur, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her palm. The young lioness stirred, opening bright, amber eyes that held an intelligence beyond her 8 weeks of life. "What are you going to call her?" Elena asked. Sana's response was immediate, a soft chuff that sounded remarkably like Elena's own name. The lioness had been listening, learning, and now she was offering something unprecedented, a name that bridged the gap between their species. "Eleni," Dr. Okafor suggested, her voice filled with wonder. "The Greek form of Elena. It means bright light." Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she understood the magnitude of what was happening. Sana wasn't just protecting her cubs, she was offering to share them, to create a new kind of family that transcended the boundaries between human and animal consciousness. "The other lions are showing similar behavioral changes," Marcus reported, scrolling through observation data. "They're approaching the research stations, making contact with the staff. It's like they're all awakening to something that was always there, waiting for the right moment." Elena looked out across the preserve, where the last 13 lions of East Africa were gathering in groups they'd never formed before. Pairs of lions stood beside researchers, their body language suggesting acceptance rather than mere tolerance. The species that had once ruled the African plains were offering partnership to the descendants of their ancient hunting companions. "They remember," Elena whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Somewhere in their genetic memory, they remember when humans and lions worked together, before cities and farms, and the barriers we built between ourselves." Sana approached slowly, her massive head lowering until she was eye level with Elena. The lioness's gaze held depths of emotion that human language couldn't express: gratitude, trust, and something that looked remarkably like love. "She's asking you to be part of their family," Dr. Okafor observed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not as a researcher studying subjects, but as an equal partner in raising her cubs." Elena placed her hand on Sana's massive head, feeling the vibration of the lioness's contented purr. The other 2 cubs approached, their small bodies warm against Elena's legs. They weren't afraid. They were welcoming her into their pride with the same acceptance their mother had shown. "This changes everything," Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. "If we can establish these connections with other endangered species, we might be able to save them not just as museum pieces, but as true partners in rebuilding the world." Elena nodded, feeling the weight of possibility settling around her like a warm blanket. The last lions hadn't just given them their cubs. They had offered humanity a chance at redemption, a path back to the partnership that had once existed between human and animal consciousness. Young Eleni stretched in Elena's arms, her tiny paws reaching toward the sky as if grasping for a future that suddenly seemed brighter than anyone had dared to imagine. The last lions of East Africa were no longer alone, and neither were the humans who had chosen to stand with them. The new covenant had begun. Asterisk.